Well, welcome back for Module 4 of the Ninja Japanese Sentence Formula. This is Kevin here again, and today we're going to talk about verb conjugation. So let's get started. So I'm really excited to get into this module here because learning verb conjugation was something that was really, to be honest, fun for me. I mean, it sounds really weird, and the topic isn't one that's all that exciting for sure, but I learned this from a really great teacher I had a long time ago, who was really the first person who opened my eyes to how great and fun Japanese could be. And this is one of the things that really stuck with me and has been really useful over the years. So I'm going to pass it along to you today. But, you know, when you look up a word in the dictionary, and in this particular instance, a verb, they only give you the dictionary form. But, you know, in real sentences, you need to not only know the dictionary form, you need to know the past tense of the verb or the negative tense, or maybe you want to tell someone that you can do something, or you want to invite somebody to do something by saying, oh, let's do something, like the volitional form. Well, wouldn't it be nice if you could just pick up a dictionary, find a verb that you want to use, and know right away how to conjugate that verb into all these different forms? Well, let's make it happen. So before we get started, we need to talk about the 3 types of verbs you're going to encounter speaking Japanese. So I'm actually going to introduce them in the reverse order, and when I go through them, I think you'll understand why. But let's start with type 3 verbs. So type 3 verbs are the exceptions that you kind of just need to remember. And the 2 most common exceptions, these are actually the only 2 that I know of, are suru and kuru, which are to do and to come. These are the ones that you'll need to know ahead of time are exceptions. All right, so what about the others? Well, type 2 verbs are verbs that typically end with the letters eru, eru, or iru, iru. So examples of type 2 verbs are taberu, hashiru, and neru, which are to eat, to run, and to sleep. A notable exception to this rule is the verb kaeru, which is to return or to go home. Although this ends in eru, it's actually a type 1 verb, which we'll cover now. So if the verb you're looking at doesn't fit into either the type 3 or type 2 category, then you have a type 1 verb. So that's pretty much everything else. Examples of type 1 verbs are nomu, arau, and asobu, which are to drink, to wash, and to play. So to kind of help you visualize what type of verb you're looking at, I've made this pretty simple flowchart here. So you start with your verb, you ask yourself, is it suru or kuru? And if it's a yes, then you have a type 3 verb. If it's no, then you ask yourself, does it end in eru or iru? If it's a yes, that's type 2. And if no, it's a type 1. So pretty straightforward. So the key to conjugating type 1 verbs is using the Japanese alphabet. And this is why I often emphasize to people that learning the Japanese alphabet is really important. So as you probably already know, the Japanese alphabet is based on the 5 sounds a, I, u, e, and o. And by adding letters like k in front of them, you make new sounds like ka, ki, ku, ke, ko, and it kind of just builds that way. So what ends up happening is that each row kind of rhymes with each other. So you can kind of imagine each of those rows as being a line, like an a line, an e line, an u line, e line, and an o line. So what's interesting is that each of these lines represent a conjugation form for verbs. For example, the a line corresponds to the negative form. The e line corresponds to formal. U line is the dictionary form. E line is the capability form, and the O line is the let's form, or the volitional form. So I'm sure that's a little confusing, but let me explain in more detail what I mean by this. So the best way to explain this is to just use an example. So let's take as an example to drink, which is nomu. So the last letter of that verb is mu. So we want to look at the ma, mi, mu, me, mo line of the alphabet, or column rather. So as we just discussed, no mu is the dictionary form. But by changing that last letter and what follows that last letter, we can quickly conjugate between all the forms. For example, no mu, the dictionary form, can change to no mi masu, which is the formal form, You go all the way up to the top. Nomanai is the negative form. Nomeru is the capability form, I can drink. And nomou, which is let's drink. And just as a side note, you would probably never hear a Japanese person say nomou, because the u sound in this case is just an extension of the o sound, so it's nomo. So pretty simple, right? So the only exception is when the last letter is u. So let's look at an example where the last letter is u. So let's look at the verb to wash, which is arau. So the last letter there is u. So you might think to yourself, okay, I want to look at the a, I, u, e, o line. Well, you're almost right. When you have an u as the last letter, you want to look at the line wa, I, u, e, o. So instead of a at the top, you want to use a wa, and that's kind of just the way it is. But everything else is the same. So as before, arau is the dictionary form. If we go up one, araimasu is the formal form. If we go all the way to the top, arawanai is to not wash. We go down one, it's araeru, which is able to wash. And the last one is arao, which is let's wash. So that's pretty easy, right? So all you really need to memorize is what I presented on the previous slide, which is that the a line is negative, the e line is formal, u line is dictionary form, e line is capability form, and o line is volitional form or let's form. What about type 2 verbs? Well, for type 2 verbs, the key is just dropping the ru. All you have to do is drop the ru, and add the ending to make the other forms. So let's look at the example to eat, taberu. So we have taberu, right, where ru is the last letter. So if we drop the ru and add masu, it is formal. So tabemasu. If we drop the ru and add nai, it becomes the negative form, tabenai. If we go down and drop the ru and make it reru, then we have the capability form, tabereru. And the last one is if we drop the ru and add yo, then we have tabeyo, which is the volitional form or the let's form. So let's look at just one more example to really drill that one in. So let's look at the verb to sleep, which is neru. So let's start with neru. We go up, nemasu, which is formal, nenai, which is to not sleep. Going down, we have nereru, which is capability form. And then the last one, neyo, which is let's sleep. So the last one are the type 3 verbs, and I hate to say it, but the key to this one is just memorization. But luckily, there are only 2 that you really need to memorize. So let's start with the first one, to do, which is suru. So the negative form of suru is shinai. Shinai. The formal form of to do is shimasu. All right, and then we have the dictionary form suru, and then the capability form is kind of completely different. It is dekiru. Dekiru, that's capability, I can do. And the last one is shio, which is the volitional form. So as you can see, the verb to do doesn't really follow any of the 2 rules that we've set out for type 1 and type 2 verbs, and that's why it's an exception. All right, the second exception is to come, which is kuru. So the negative form, not to come, is konai. The formal form is kimasu. The dictionary form, of course, is kuru. The capability form is koreru. And the volitional form is koyo. So this is probably the most difficult set because you have to memorize each one of them. But like I said, there's only 2 of them. And make sure to drill these in your head, because if you look at these 2 verbs and think, oh, this is a type 1 verb, and try to use the rules for type 1 verbs, it's not going to work. And that's it. I mean, believe it or not, that's all you really need to know. You can take any verb, and as long as you can identify what type it is, you can do these conjugations. Pretty powerful, right? So I encourage you to try this on your own, because the more you do it, the more it'll become second nature, and after a while, you won't even need to think about whether it's a type 1, 2, or 3 verb, and you'll just be able to conjugate it just as a native speaker would. So that pretty much wraps up Module 4. Hopefully you found the information in this module useful, and once you're ready to move on, I'll see you in Module 5, where we'll talk about past, present, and future tenses.